In 2023, a group of researchers conducted an experiment. They got a bunch of linguists to read a bunch of short articles and decide which ones they thought were written by ChatGPT, so GPT-4, and which ones were written by humans. And the results were not very successful. The linguists were largely unable to identify AI versus human writing, and the success rate was only about 38%. So even linguists were not able to identify human versus AI writing, better than random, in a controlled randomized experiment. And this has led to many discussions and publications among social scientists, education, and linguists. What should universities do about essays that are written by students, and is it even possible to detect AI-generated writing? My name is Bai. I am a machine learning engineer and a PhD in natural language processing. In this video, I will try to answer this question. Is it possible to detect AI-generated writing, and how? Or is this just an arms race that we cannot win? It is well known at this point that ChatGPT tends to overuse certain words, like delve into, at least more than humans do. And one paper looked at scientific writing over time, and found that the word delve experienced a dramatic uptick in frequency after ChatGPT was released. Other words, like crucial and potential, had a less dramatic but still a significant increase in frequency. The frequency increase for the word delve was even greater than words like pandemic and coronavirus during the year 2020. So this suggests to us that we can maybe make a really simple ChatGPT detector just by looking at the string and checking if the word delve exists in a string. If it does, then it is AI generated, and this will probably get a classifier that is better than random. Obviously, this would not really be useful for catching cheaters because this is really easy to circumvent, and the word delve is used by humans some of the time. It is a real word. But even if it's not useful to detect whether a specific piece of text is AI written, it still may be useful as an indicator to track in a corpus of text over time how much of it is written by AI. But before we go into that, let me share something I've been working on. It is a tool to help you write things using voice. Simply speak your thoughts, and the AI will recognize your voice, add punctuation, and fix the grammar in real time. It uses state-of-the-art speech recognition AI, just like the models I'm describing in this video. I use it every day to write everything so much faster than if I'm writing it manually, including all my emails and my daily stand-up updates. Try it for free at voicewriter.io, link in the description. Now back to the video. So then, what is a better way to detect AI-generated text automatically? Well, the first thing that we might try is a text classification approach. Text classification is one of the most common problems in NLP, and probably something you've seen before, like classifying a news article into several different topics, or classifying reviews into positive or negative sentiment. We can use the same method, so train a text classification model to detect whether a text is written by AI or by a human. There are many models that can do this, and all you need is a bunch of labeled training data. And what's interesting is that OpenAI themselves have actually released a model to classify between AI-written and human-written text. However, they later took down this model because of its low rate of accuracy. If we look at the eval metrics, they say that their model correctly identifies 26% of AI-written text as true positives, and 9% of human-written text as false positives. So not very good. And I can understand why they took it down. If people are relying on this model to catch people cheating, for example, you will need much better accuracy than this. Here's another paper that tried to train a classifier to detect AI-written text. And they tried to do this in several different ways. They tried both using linguistic features as well as using deep learning. They identified several different stylistic factors that tend to distinguish AI versus human writing. To summarize, ChatGPT never goes off topic, it never gives subjective opinions, it tends to be very logical and formal, and never expresses emotions. So if you use ChatGPT, this is more or less what you already know. In their classification results, they have pretty impressive F1 scores using the Roberta model, so a deep learning model for text classification. Their F1 scores is all in the 90s on both English and Chinese. So does this mean that the problem is basically solved? Well, not really. things are a bit harder in practice, where you might need to classify a lot of different topics and writing styles. People will prompt the LLM to write in a different style. They might try to do things to avoid being detected. And of course, there are lots of different LLMs now. So we don't really know how much of these results hold up in practice, but probably not in the high 90%, I would guess. Training a classifier is not the only approach, and a different approach of AI text detection is doing zero-shot detection. And what this means is an algorithm that can take some text and figure out whether it's likely generated from the model or from something else, like a human writing it. But it does not require any training data, like a bunch of human-written text, to learn the difference. This paper here, called DetectGPT, proposes a zero-shot detection algorithm based on probability curvature. The idea of this is pretty simple. To determine if a sample is generated by the model, the idea is to make some perturbations to the sample and look at the relationship of the original sample to the perturbations. If the text is generated by the model, then it is in a local maximum with regard to the model probability. So making some random perturbations to it will decrease the model's likelihood, according to its own likelihood function. On the other hand, if the text is written by a human, then it is not necessarily in any kind of local maximum, and making a perturbation to it is equally likely to increase the likelihood as to decrease the likelihood. Let's look at an example of how this might work with this sentence. And we are trying to detect whether it is generated by the model or by a human. We perturb the sentence by changing the bordered words with synonyms. So for example, wisely can be replaced with carefully, and important can be replaced with crucial. And then we observe the log likelihood of these perturbed sentences and compare them to those of the original. And if we find that all of these perturbations are less likely than the original, then it's probably that the original was generated by the model. And the authors achieved pretty impressive F1 scores as well using this method to detect AI-generated writing. However, it is important to note that this algorithm only works if you have access to the model, and you can get the probability of sentences that are fed into the model. So these guys here, and as far as I know, none of the API providers like OpenAI can do this. They can only generate text for you, but there's no way to get the probability distribution of the tokens or anything like that. So this is something that could be relevant for detecting text generated by open source models, but you cannot use it to detect whether a text is generated by ChatGPT because you don't have access to this model. Moving on, another way we could do AI text detection is apply a watermark to the model while generating it. So in order to do this, you have to have access to the model and be able to modify the model's generation algorithm to add a watermark to the outputs in order to detect it later. This is a watermark applied to every token while the language model is generating. In each step of the model's generation, it's taking a prefix and trying to complete the next word. So let's say is one of these words. And normally you would do some kind of random sampling, like nucleus sampling, to pick one of these words to put into the next token of the model. The idea of a watermark is you take this last token here and use it to seed an RNG. And this RNG will randomly pick 50% of the words to put in a green list and the other 50% to put in a red list. During sampling, the algorithm would boost the probability of sampling one of the green words and reduce the probability of sampling one of the red words. If you apply the right amount of boosting, so boost the green words by a little bit but not by too much, then you can apply a watermark to the model's output without degrading the quality by too much. And the way you detect this watermark is check how many of the text is green tokens. If there is no watermark, then it should be around 50%. And if there is a watermark, then the number of green tokens will be larger than 50%. And how much larger? You can apply a z-test to determine the level of significance, like how confident are you that the model has been watermarked. And one reason this is powerful is because you need to change a lot of tokens in order to bypass the watermark. Because the model every time it samples a token, it requires looking at the previous token. So in order to bypass the watermark, you have to change around 50% of the tokens to something else, which is quite difficult to do. Okay, now, so we talked about a bunch of ways to detect LLM-generated text, but what about if you're an adversary? What are some ways that people might try to cheat an LLM detector? So generate a piece of text using AI, but have it be detected as human-generated. And one idea that kind of works is apply a paraphraser. So this is an LLM that's different from the LLM that's used to generate the original text, but it just takes the output of the first LLM and rewrites it to say the same thing, but in different words. And the point is to be different enough that it will be detected as not generated by the first LLM. And if applying this once is not enough, then just run this paraphraser model multiple times. It's even better if the attacker has access to the LLM detector, because then you can run it until it detects this text as not LLM generated. And you can do this no matter what type of method is used to detect the text generation. You can apply it to classifier detector or watermark detector, it doesn't really matter. Here's an example result from the paper. And the blue line here is the original watermark method, and it's very accurate. And each of these colored lines is applying one iteration of the paraphrase model. So as you apply more iterations of paraphrasing, it gets closer to this diagonal line here, which means that the detection method is as good as random. And the paper found that if you just apply this paraphrase model on itself, like recursively 5 or 6 times, then the detection model accuracy gets pretty close to random. So what's the takeaway after all of this? And is it possible to detect AI writing? On one hand, we have all these methods, like classifier, like watermarks, to help you detect if a text is AI generated. But on the other hand, there are lots of ways to try to evade detection as well, like just manually editing the output of the model in various ways, or doing some prompt engineering to make the model write in a different style, or using a paraphrase model. So which side is stronger at any point in time is not really clear. And additionally, most of these papers assume that there is one model, and you just have to detect output from that model. But as we all know, there are so many different models to choose from, and somebody could try to use any of these models to write text. So I think the best way to think about this is not a binary, but a spectrum. There is a spectrum of how much you can use AI to write a piece of text. The most extreme case is if you just take text that's generated by ChatGPT and directly copy it into your blog post, or your essay, or whatever. And I think this is probably detectable today. The other extreme is if you don't use any word generated by the AI, but you just use it for ideas, and this is generally considered okay. And in the middle between these two extreme points is a lot of gray area. So like if you use AI to write some parts of it, but then move it around and then edit the style to fit your style better, and how much of that is detectable, that really depends on the model and the detection model and how much modification is done to the text. And another important factor is how much text is being written using AI. If it's just one paragraph, it's quite hard to detect, compared to if there are numerous pages that are written with the same AI. Even if they do things to hide their AI usage, if the amount of text is large enough, then the evidence will start to pile up, making them easier to detect. If you're interested in letting AI help you a bit with writing, but you still want to express your own thoughts and not just copy from ChatGPT, then you should check out voicewriter.io. It uses speech recognition to help you get your thoughts into the document really quickly, but there's gonna be a lot of mistakes. So the second step is you apply an AI model to fix the grammar. But the ideas are still yours, so you're not gonna be detected as AI-generated text. Try it for free today at voicewriter.io. And finally, if you learned something from this video, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel, and ring the bell icon to get notified when I release new videos. Leave a comment below if you have any questions, and I will respond as quickly as possible. Thanks for watching.